5 gunshots echo through Brussels, Belgium. Gerald Bull lies lifeless on the pavement. Born in the small city of North Bay, Ontario, Bull's seemingly ordinary life was anything but ordinary, and it ends right there in a pool of blood in the city of Brussels. Who was Gerald Bull? He was somebody who lived in the shadows, dealing with international arms and rubbing shoulders with global power brokers. From places in the Middle East to South Africa, he's hanging around with the kind of people you'd expect to find at the VIP table at Epstein's Island. Bull isn't a casualty of some random burglary. All the bullet casings are gone and picked up after his crime, and this whole thing reeks of a professional hit. The hit is likened to agencies such as the Mossad, MI6, and the CIA. Guess who else he has ties to? Our little friend Saddam Hussein. Whoever killed this guy wants it to remain a mystery. To this day, it's never been solved. As we move on with this, we're going to essentially try to not only piece together this person's life, we're going to piece together why his work may have been what caused his death. This story begins in North Bay, Ontario, Canada. Our lifeless victim, Gerald Bull. He was born on March 9, 1928. In his early years, he develops a fascination with flight, inspired by the groundbreaking work of the Wright brothers and R.H. Goddard, who was an American engineer who created the first liquid-fueled rocket. The curiosity planted seeds for his later career in artillery and aerospace engineering. Early on in his life, Bull loses his parents. He's relocated to Toronto, Ontario, where he's raised by his aunt and his uncle. Here, he's encouraged to pursue his academic interests. Particularly, he excels in mathematics and physics. Bull has a thirst for knowledge, and it leads him to the University of Toronto, where he begins his higher education journey. His intellectual pursuits took him to the University of Illinois for his doctoral studies. It's said that Bull also received some scholarships from Caltech, and he basically did his PhD in aeronautics. Bull returns to Canada, and he comes back to join the Canadian Armament Research and Development Establishment, or CARD. Here he works on a variety of projects related to artillery and aerodynamics. He works on a project called HARP, the High Altitude Research Project, not to be confused with the weather control stuff. This is a different HARP, and probably equally as fucking crazy because they were trying to shoot stuff into space, as we'll get into. So HARP was designed to develop something called super guns. And this guy wanted to develop a super gun. Sounds so fucking cool. Sounds so American. Anyway, super guns, also known as big guns, are essentially large pieces of artillery designed to fire projectiles over extremely long distances, and in some instances into space. They push the boundaries of traditional artillery using advanced engineering techniques and materials to achieve high muzzle velocities and therefore significantly extended ranges. Essentially, this would negate the need to have rockets. If you could build one of these things, and there's been attempts to do things with like rail guns as well. But this thing is, this would be fast forward gun for the future if you could get rid of rockets to launch shit into space. So the concept of super guns really isn't that new. As long as humans could throw stuff, they've wanted to build bigger versions of that. From slingshots, then you get up to catapults, guns, missiles. One of the cool things is the Dardanelles gun, built in the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century. So that's one of the first recorded attempts of trying to build a massive gun. It's said, though, that Bull truly did provide some groundbreaking science work and research into this field and was behind some big old guns. So it is said, though, that throughout, for all his work, he was really well respected as a scientist. He actually received a 5-star rating from ISIS. Speaking of ratings and reviews, guys, please give us a review or a rating wherever you're listening. We don't want to have our first review come from ISIS. Project HARP's 16-inch gun, based in Barbados, held the record for the highest and longest shot ever achieved by an artillery piece. This is said to be even a bigger shot and a bigger load than John Holmes had before he passed away. The gun was capable of firing a 180 kilogram projectile to an altitude of 180 kilometers, effectively brushing the edge of space. This record, set in 1966, remains unbroken to this day. I don't know, I have a hard time believing that in that case, that the people behind HARP just gave up on the idea of having a space gun when they got right to the edge. And I'm sure they weren't into edging that fucking much. That's just the end of it. Unless, you never know. Maybe there's some kind of physical limit that we just can't break. Or the Earth's flat. I don't know. Another infamous instant of a really cool supergun is Project Babylon. So we'll get into Project Babylon and again, Gerald's association to that in a little bit. And we're going to start to connect the dots as to why he's laying dead on the floor or outside his apartment in a pool of blood in Brussels. The concept of superguns theoretically is like sound and practical. It would save you a lot of time, put SpaceX out of business likely. But despite all those kind of like challenges that come with building something like a system like this, a bunch of governments tried to. United States, Canada, Iraq, and I'm pretty sure there were some other ones, but that's the ones that I was able to come across as a dummy. So under Bull's leadership, Project HARP really did achieve a lot. The big boy in Barbados was truly like, it was a huge development, even though they just edged it. They didn't make it all the way to space. Eventually, though, like I said, the project was canceled, and the main thing being cited was budgets. And you could say, I guess they were all just getting too high. The termination of this project was a severe blow to Bull. He remained undeterred, though, like he went from being the big fish in a small pond to having to look for a fucking job. So he does what a lot of people do. He decides to start looking for work outside of where he lives and starts looking abroad. In 1967, he doesn't truly have a clear path forward, but I think this is probably where you might say he starts to make some questionable decisions. Bull decides to take his expertise in artillery and technology to the private sector, and he founds his own company called the Space Research Corporation, SRC, which is based in the United States and Canada. SRC was unique in its time. It was one of the first private companies to be involved in the development of space technology. Bull worked on a number of projects through SRC, including the development of new types of artillery, which continued to research the possibility of fucking superguns to launch satellites. Despite some initial success, SRC struggled financially. To keep his company afloat, Bull began to take clients on who were willing to fund his research. This search leads him to South Africa, and just happens to be during the midst of a arms embargo. But this guy needs to make money, and he's faced with the decision, like, I think he had considered originally building a submarine to go to the bottom of the ocean to look at the Titanic and decided that was not safe. So he decides to go the other way and get into weapons trafficking. There's an embargo on South Africa at the time, and we're going to get into why. But he figures that these people could make they got the money and they got the need. And now he's got a business. And Bull decides to start working with them despite the embargo, and he's arrested and charged with violating the United Nations arms embargo against South Africa. The embargo is in place there because of the apartheid, which in South Africa was a period of institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination against kind of people of color that takes place basically from the 1940s to the 1990s. This was pretty fucked up shit, colonial, like they're trying to kind of colonial type activities. They actually took advice from Canada on how to, I don't know how you say it, but they were trying to make people who they thought were like uncivilized, civilized. And they were definitely okay with treating people the way they thought was okay, which was really mean and really racist. And they did really shitty things. So in response to this, like we do with a lot of nations, there's embargoes put on the way. Marco's embargo was put on South Africa, and he violates it. He decides to sell artillery technology to the South Africans and to South African companies and people down there. And Bull's selling his artillery shit and tech down to people in South Africa and companies and governments down there. And yeah, he gets in trouble. He ends up essentially destroying his reputation. And also he ends up going to prison like he should have, because that was fucking stupid. And yeah, I don't know why. I truly don't know. The guy that sounded like that was so talented decides to do stuff like this. And I guess, money behind it, I get that. Maybe he didn't agree with the rules, but you got to be a bad dude in your core to do something like that. It's hard to imagine he was somebody North Bay can probably be proud of. And that's just the start of this guy. Like, it doesn't end there. He doesn't learn his lesson and become somebody that does some really cool things for humanity, in the sense of things that will help humanity be a better species. So he goes to prison. I think he's in there for 6 months, and he serves his sentence in the United States. After he gets out of prison, nobody wants to hire him. So like a lot of people, Bull decides he's going to work for Saddam Hussein. Where else does exiled from the industry weapons scientist going to work? And yeah, he goes over to the enemy at the time. If you remember, Iraq and the West were not friends at that time. So he goes to work for Saddam to build more weapons. But speaking of international tyrants, I just want to give a big shout out to Crystal C for their donation to the show. Your money is helping keep me out of international criminal podcast gangs and from being sex trafficked. So thanks again, and anyone listening, we truly love your support. Onward to Project Babylon, which is this job he takes on with Saddam in Iraq. And this is a place, I guess, at the time where America hadn't spread freedom to yet. And Saddam Hussein was trying to look for ways to gain the upper hand and build a cool country that does better space stuff and better weapon stuff than anyone else. So in 1988, he invites Bull to come work for him. He wants to work on a project called Project Babylon. This is one of his most infamous chapters, where he decides to go to the Middle East and help them develop a super gun more powerful than other super guns. This initiative is led by the Iraqi government under President Hussein, and it wants to build essentially this giant gun that will launch satellites, can possibly shoot down satellites, can also be used as a weapon against the Western countries possibly, or other countries in the Middle East. So in terms of the project completion, it said that they did get a project completed, or did complete Babylon, and it ended up being two guns. One called Big Babylon, which is a 156 meter long cannon capable of launching a 600 kilogram projectile into orbit. They also built a smaller prototype, Baby Babylon. And this little guy was the same as the big guy, but it was cute. It still was effective if you knew how to use it. It might not have been as big as the other ones, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't good. So he builds these two pieces of artillery, and as you can imagine, some people that weren't friends with the Iraqi government were not overly happy about this, including countries in the West, including some capable people in countries like Israel. The main controversy with this weapon, though the official purpose being said it's for launching satellites and peaceful, it was part of peaceful research, building a giant super gun. All the international players were they didn't believe it. And they really did think it was going to be used for military purposes, especially in the Middle East. They also thought it could be capable of delivering long-range, non-conventional warheads to their targets. So Project Babylon is totally fraught with challenges. One of the most significant ones was obtaining the necessary materials and components without attracting the attention of international authorities. Lo and behold, it was at that time people didn't want to sell them shit to blow themselves up. Yeah. So Bull and his Iraqi partners had to go to they really had to circumvent a lot of the international restrictions. They would do things that got caught out for splitting orders up between multiple companies, countries, shipments to mask the materials they were buying. However, despite the efforts, the international community soon caught on. And in the 1990s, a customs officer in the UK intercepted a large shipment of gun barrels destined for Iraq. This shipment sparked a huge controversy, and the international community just found out, and they were pissed. Many in the communities, particularly in the Middle East, saw this as an escalation to the dangerous arms race. And there was also concerns about the potential for the supergun to be used as a WMD, or weapon of mass destruction. And Bull, this guy, yeah, this is the kind of work he's doing over there. Dick. Anyhow, I guess someone's got to do it. Got to pay the bills, right? Why not kill people in the process? So Bull, he receives all this criticism, rightfully again, about his willingness to work with oppressive regimes and having a disregard for international law in pursuit of his scientific ambitions. So he continues to work on Project Babylon, and right up till the end, he's working on these projects and anything to do with kind of building weapons up until his death. And as we get into how he died, I'm sure he had to have known who killed him, and he had the answer. He knew why. Okay, so as we mentioned before, he was shot multiple times. It's believed that it was shot 5 times. I think 2 of them in the head and 3 were, I want to say he was shot in the back. But it was an assassination, and there was no question that this was an assassination. And there was no question that the people that assassinated him were likely following him for some while. The assailants didn't leave behind any spent cartridges, so they picked everything up, or they were using a revolver. No one claimed responsibility for his death, and officially this crime remains unsolved. The investigation reveals stuff about his identity, and that's it. That's all we find out, is he's involved in all this shit, but not who kills him. Okay, so it's revealed during the investigation that in the months leading up to his actual assassination, his apartment was broken into several times, and it's reported to the police, but it looked like people were searching for something, and nothing was ever actually really reported stolen. This happens a few times, and this is happening at a time when he's still deeply involved with Project Babylon and working with these nefarious characters. And yeah, he's assassinated without a trace on that day of March 22nd. And when police arrive at the scene, it's suggested by witnesses he's shot by a 3-man team. When police arrive, they found the key still in his door and an unopened briefcase nearby containing nearly $20,000 in cash. So someone wasn't trying to rob him, and it certainly seemed like he might have been trying to escape. But yeah, it's pretty clear that Bull is being followed by someone before his death, and just like that, I'd also like to be followed by you guys before my death. So please, wherever you're listening, give me a follow. Subscribe if you're on YouTube. The police investigation into this is pretty much non-existent and then not a lot of details are ever released. And it's widely speculated that it's because there was ties to governments who may have been involved in his death that did not like the work that he was doing. His cooperation with Saddam Hussein was seen as an immediate threat by Israel, which had previous military engagements with Iraq during the Arab-Israeli War. Israel was particularly concerned about the development of the supergun, fearing it could be used to launch nukes into their territory. According to investigative journalist Gordon Thomas, Bull's assassination had been sanctioned by Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir. Thomas alleges that Nahum Admoni, the director of Mossad, sent a 3-man team to Brussels to carry out the assassination. Following Bull's death, Mossad allegedly spread false stories to European media, suggesting that Bull had been killed by Iraqi agents. Israel and Iran both had immediate interest in seeing Bull discontinue his operation with Hussein. Bull's work on all these critical defense projects meant that he was a significant asset and also a hugely significant potential liability to several groups. As such, it has been speculated that in addition to kind of Iraq and Israel, Iran, the CIA, MI6, the governments of Chile, Syria, and South Africa could have been involved in Bull's assassination. So these guys involved in so much fucking crime in so many parts of the world and so many nefarious things that literally anybody could be the perpetrator behind this. And I guess you could say it's no fucking surprise. When you are doing that kind of work, there's just so many stories of kind of weapon scientists getting fixed for working with the wrong people. As I mentioned, he was so deeply involved into that Project Babylon stuff that after his assassination, the project's halted, everything's shut down. Nobody wants, things take off at this point where everybody that may have somewhat been involved with him doesn't want any wind blowing in their direction. So they all just wipe their hands clean of this. And it's said too, this goes as far as even the police just not even really investigating this and everything getting shut down. So as quick as this story starts, like if this guy, he's completely involved in all this espionage,